talk about learning to learn, or also a little bit about critical thinking, a skill that many people in the world they do not possess any kind of critical thinking or ability to evaluate information or make their own opinion about what's going on around them, or about anything, about money, about relationship, because they are so stuffed up with all the propaganda and all the trash that their society teaches them. For example, there is a lot of education and media that comes in every country, most of which supports a certain view of history, or supports the political establishment, or supports the wealthy, or and this is not education. This is not learning. This is trash. Well, the Sufi master said that nobody can live in a house where a corpse or a dead body is rotting away, which means that before you can really critically think about anything, or learn a subject or idea correctly, come to right conclusions, before you have to get rid of the stuff that's trash and it's not true. And so the like in older Iranian or Shia theology, they say that there is like really two or three different kind of knowledge. The first one is called iktisabi, which means like you go to school and you study some history, some literature, some physics of discoveries other scientists have made. The word iktisab means to acquire. This means something that you didn't do crap to create this knowledge. Somebody else wrote it down according to their views and their conclusions, and it came down and you just read it and accepted it, or kind of accepted it part ways. The second one is knowledge that's like what Galileo was doing, experimental and scientific knowledge, where you conduct experiments, you make theories based on some initial experiments, and then you refine these theories, and there is a peer review, and then it becomes some kind of scientific knowledge or tradition, like the Newtonian physics, or Einsteinian view of relativity, something like that. So this is a knowledge that can hold water. It's based on scientific results and experiments, and has been refined and over. So it's a kind of knowledge that is much harder to dispute, much more difficult to re-engineer, because it's based on the way the world operates. Like Newtonian physics is extremely difficult to upend. Well, the electromagnetic theories kind of sidestep the Newtonian physics, because you're dealing with light and it has kind of different behavior, and then it led to theories about space and gravity, all that. It's not a kind of knowledge that you can just upend it really easily, and also it does have philosophical implications, and people get in trouble because Newtonian physics, philosophical implications are very materialistic, which also led to um, a very harsh materialistic world in the World War II and so on. But there is yet a third kind of knowledge. That's the Arab or the Muslim tradition. They call it ilm laduni. Laduni means like innate. Like ilm also means true knowledge that you cannot get from here and there. It's you have to get it by inspiration, and this kind of knowledge is only like prophets or seers or spiritualists. They say that you have to connect to the higher self or to God, or use your extended mind. Is more in tune with what the universe wants to infuse into you. For example, in the Arabic or Islamic tradition, they have two ways of communicating with God or the universe. One is called ilham, which means like little clues or little inspiration that come to you in dreams and so on. The other one is called wahi, which is a much more direct communion with God and receiving knowledge like that. For example, like Noah, he received inspiration. He knew that there was going to be a flood. But if you study the scriptures, you see that whenever a prophet or a seer or a social outcast like me makes a call, says this is gonna happen because I saw it in a dream, or I felt inspired, or I received wahy, or then this kind of knowledge is one of the characteristics of it is almost always contrary to the established views and the interest of different groups in society, what they want to do, and where they want to go. For example, if you study like Old Testament or Quran, you see that two major groups always come in and fight with this kind of knowledge, or with the prophet that has brought it, like with Moses or with Noah. Or the first one group is the bourgeoisie, the very wealthy, and there is a social order, and they are the beneficiary of this social order or economic order, and they don't want it changed. So, for example, we see in the economic history with the theories and ideas that Karl Marx had about capitalism, that it was a destructive economic system and ruins many people and benefits a few. It could be changed easily, but there was a tremendous hostility, and even some countries, they changed their system. Other countries like United States sanctioned them or went to war with them to stop that. So even though socialism might have been a better system, there is so much special interest to stop it or to ruin it that it never really could take off. Another example is another group that comes out and fights with anything that's a knowledge like that, inspirational knowledge, is the what Quran uses the word for the bourgeoisie, uses the word mala, which means like wealthy, aghniya. I think mala means like the religious already established religious orders and or clergy. For example, say there is a new prophet comes out, like Mormons, and then the rest of the Christians, they really shun them, and they become outcasted because their philosophy is based on inspiration or a new person's psychic experiences. Then the rest of the community bans them. For example, in the New Testament, I read that Peter was one of the disciples. He had to go and buy and construct a new synagogue to have a place of worship for Jews that were devoted to Christ. So basically the other Jews kicked them out, and then so it was a new religion based on inspiration, based on faith, which was not exactly what the already established religious orders were. So these two groups, the bourgeoisie and also religious establishment. But going back to what the Sufi master said, most people's outlook on life or how things are or operate is something that's acquired. It's like a structure, an old building that resides in the back of their head, like a ghost in the machine, and then it really doesn't correspond to reality, but people find it convenient, or they don't want to give it up, and it stays around. It's something like it's not really knowledge. If you want to get real knowledge and real if you want to understand Sufism or Islam or Christianity, or understand the scientific theories or ideas, or discover new things, you need, before you do anything else, you need to kind of put this building down. So because it does nothing but cause problems. It's like you discover new things, but you're constantly going back to false mythologies. Or if we were going to constantly use Greek mythology or Iranian ancient history to construct new theories of the universe about consciousness, we'll be very crippled, because we're using something that doesn't work to represent something that's you need to have new theories and new structures that correspond to this new knowledge, these new ideas, and the old ones, they're just going to be a hindrance. We can see the same thing with a lot of physicists that we're very used to and happy with the Newtonian physics, but they have a very difficult time to explain quantum physics, and that the fact that the consciousness is part of the universe, they can't do it. There was a conference in Laguna Beach a few years ago that some physicists they were attending, and they were trying to prove that the double slit experiment and doesn't mean the same thing as most physicists now know, or that quantum entanglement is not real. Something is wrong with these results, and they try to come up with new theories that would be more compatible with Newtonian physics. So you see that, like all the structure, you cannot really do anything more with it. You need to move on and do something else. Well, the Sufi master said that each kind of knowledge, it has its own tools and its own its own methods and approaches. For example, in another example that the Sufis use is like in Iran, there are two kinds of people who do needlework. One is like the kind of people that have very fine needles and they use it to patch together clothes that are made of silk, which is very fine material. They really need very nice exacting work for that. But then there is another kind of needlework. Well, in the old time, a lot of porters in the bazaar, they use something that is like a palon. Palon means like a back brace to prevent the back of the porter from getting hurt from all the sharp edges of the loads that had to carry, help them cushion it and also distribute the weight. But then somebody had to construct these palons or braces, and it was very rough. Usually it was very rough kind of cloth. You really needed big needles to patch this or sew this palon together. So these were both needlework that sewers were engaged in, but one was very rough, the other one was very fine work. So like this is kind of like a comparison between Newtonian physics and more advanced physics, like what Einstein was doing, or quantum physics. As you go along, you see that it becomes more mathematical and also it merges with metaphysics, because you have to make sense of the results, and you can't do that with the Newtonian physics. So the learning to learn is also realizing that you need different tools and approaches, and sometimes you have to get rid of a lot of old stuff. And the other thing the Sufi master said is that knowledge does not end. Is not, because as you study the quantum physics and other forms of physics, you see that it leads to other kinds of theories, or for example, it leads to string theory and holographic universe, all kinds of other stuff that there is no end to these discoveries. There is no need to kind of like feel like you have come to an end. I guess some physicists were thinking that physics would end until they discovered that electromagnetism and quantum physics, they don't adhere, or they are not really part of Newtonian physics. Anyhow, some of these ideas are a little bit strange to begin with. Okay, the other thing to remember is that many forms of knowledge or understanding or propaganda that the ruling classes, like the real wealthy and the political establishment, they disseminate this information and they give it out, and often very forcefully or in great quantity, is totally false. It does not help you in any way to understand what goes on in the world, or make any theories about the future of a country or economic system. These types of information, it only helps them to maintain governance and maintain the existing status quo, existing economic practices, which are very, very destructive. If you look at the economic history, see that there have been so many discoveries since just before World War II and after, and each one of them, they could have resulted in a tremendous wealth to the population or to people in the world. But we can see also at the same time that we have a Wall Street. They come in, they publish their fraudulent paper, and they monetize it, and they rip off all the benefits that the technology advances the law, and then the rest of us, we are living in like a very slow plateau, very gradually getting another dollar extra in our paycheck. You see what I'm saying? If you want to succeed in investment, or succeed in discovering new sciences, or understanding what goes on in the world, you need to break away from these paradigms, no matter what it takes, because they are nothing but a hindrance, and they confuse you from seeing the big picture. A way I use to get rid of my acquired propaganda is to like read very widely. For example, if I am looking for news for particular thing that happened, I read it from many foreign newspapers. I listen to many diverse people, people that I'm sure for a fact that they don't support the establishment ideas. And then not only read widely about news, read widely about any subject. Like that, there's many different writers. I also read the people who were like the original inventors or original people that inspired these ideas, because their thinking is very complete, and they take into account even the past false ideas, and they discredit it, like Galileo, and you see how this knowledge developed, and the underlying flaws or benefits. Is a much better reading than reading from like a clergy or from established professor, because these people that came later, they just regurgitating those same ideas. They were not the inventors, they were not the original deep thinkers, and all they want to do is get recognition and get a post in university, get get their name somewhere. They didn't have as much love or care about that subject or topic. They didn't pursue it or even present it. For example, I have read about double slit experiment, and the fact that consciousness of the observer was part of the universe. I've read like 80 or 86 quantum physics books. Even until I came around, I read the works of Tom Campbell. I didn't fully understand what this experiment meant. Then when he said that he had extended the experiment, I had put detectors on both slits, and then he went further and said that if I checked the record of the detectors, then the pattern on the screen would be like that of a particle. But if I didn't check, but the detectors still detected it, the knowledge was there, but I didn't want to know, then the pattern would be like a wave. See, this is like a pioneer in that field. He went and discovered new aspects of the same thing. The other guys, they just regurgitated whatever that was going on without really understanding what was the problem, what was the thing that you should be looking for. When I read the Tom Campbell, it really hit me that, yeah, the observer is part of the universe, because if the observer knows the result, then things change. If he doesn't want to know the result, then the wave pattern will emerge again. See, this is a big difference. So I would encourage people to read the original or historical narrative of the discoverer of a science, or for example, like a Muslim, they are encouraged to read the ahadith, which means like the stories about Prophet Muhammad, because you see the original founder and what he experienced is true, versus the later on others just repeating what he had said. It wasn't their experience. Okay. Also, the Sufi master said that the Sufis, they want knowledge. The word he used is the aksish munakis در دلت, which means like the picture or that experience manifests itself in your heart. Like you personally experience it, and then hey, this is Islam. But versus somebody who heard it, then just repeating the same stuff. Anyhow, in Sufism, if you didn't experience something yourself, and you saw the parallel with the scriptures, really you didn't know what was going on. You didn't experience it. Your kind of knowledge is iktisabi, which means like, hey, I just read it, I have some education. Hey, I went to this Ivy League college too. Well, treat me with respect to. Anyhow, maybe I get a job. Anyhow, I think when I was working in my younger days, many employers really hated me. Well, one reason was that I was Muslim. It was the Iranian Revolution. They had kicked out the Americans. That was one reason for the hate. The other one was that my ideas were more original. It conflicted with the established views. I have other ideas about critical thinking and learning to learn, and the Sufis, they have a lot of literature and writing about this, because Sufism is real Islam or real Christianity. It doesn't encourage you to acquire all kinds of book learning. You have to experience it. Then you become a Christian or a Muslim. And then there is a famous saying, two famous sayings by Prophet Muhammad. One says, ليس العلم بكثرة التعلم بل هو نور يخسفه الله في قلب من يشاء. Knowledge, true knowledge, is not to the extent of book learning, acquiring knowledge through other people, but it's a light that God puts in the heart of the enlightened. Then the second saying by Prophet Muhammad is that says, whatever your brain constructs, like a structure, this is like a creation of you, and it's like a ghost in the back of your head. Even if you construct it in the most exquisite details, like Ptolemy's, circles that shows the Earth in the center of the universe and everything. You construct this mathematical model, but it has a few flaws. This is not reality. It wasn't based on experience. Okay, so this will fall back to you. Well, that's an Arabic expression. It means you will fall in your face, or you will fall into it. It's not true. It's not based on reality. These concepts are very important, and there is a difference when the knowledge is with the person who's the inspirer of that knowledge, or that religion, or that philosophy, rather than something that you find here and there. Also, the very last is that when I'm trying to learn a difficult subject, I go find real simple books that were written about it, or go to many idiotic YouTube channel that kind of describe it. I want to get like an outline of that knowledge. Then the second stage would be I gradually migrate to more books that are more express this in more mathematical terms. And then, while in the graduate school, in the graduate courses, most graduate students, the only thing they want to see is about a problem. Say that you have a vibrating drum, they want to see some geometry, all the terms and important parameters defined or signified in Greek letters, and then the partial differential equations or the governing equations in integral form. So this is where it leads in Newtonian physics, but then in other kinds of physics or knowledge, you need their own appropriate tools. But what I just told you, one for the Newtonian physics. Thank you very much. My stuff is research. You cannot find this stuff too many places in the internet. Please subscribe and please leave a comment. Have a great day.